Hello, welcome to the AppleInsider podcast. I'm William Gallagher. This week's episode is brought to you by Notion, and more about them later. But for now, I'm going to admit to you that I am feeling blue about the Apple car being cancelled forever. Joining me, though, is Wes Hilliard, who, am I right, Wes, are you less sad about the car going?
Well, it's complicated because we all know if Apple Car ever came to be, it would be at least $100,000, if not more. I mean, it could have been a $50,000-$60,000 car, but who are we kidding here?
Yes.
It was just one of those products that Apple could have been working on. Definitely a lot of signs, a lot of patents, a lot of internal buildup, a lot of rumors. But is it truly dead? We don't know. It's dead for now. They've put it to bed. They could always return to it. Let's not forget, this is one of those things that have died about 5 times before. We'll get into that.
That's true.
But this one's sounding true and truly dead at this point. It's canceled. It's done. They're moving everyone off of the project to other systems. But for now, there is no Apple Car coming.
That's weird, though. When you said that about the price, I suddenly thought, if it actually launched, I could see me talking to you about, will there be an Apple Car SE at some point? And I got interested again then, and then I remembered. It's all over. I have a funny thing.
Do you think it would be called Car? Just Apple logo Car?
Okay. Essentially, well, yeah, I mean, is that better than iCar, which it would have been?
Oh, that would have been awful
10 years ago.
Yeah. That does sound like something Volkswagen would release, though.
Yes. It's funny. I would have told you I'm not a car person at all, but then Tesla came along, and I had a test drive in it, and I was so impressed with it. I was really, really keen on it. And then, along with Tesla comes Elon Musk, and it's sort of soured it a little bit for me. So Apple was my last hope for this, because there are no other electric vehicle manufacturers out there at all. None. It was going to be Tesla. No, there are others.
So it's kind of it's wild. Pretty much everyone. It's harder to. It's a shorter list to say who's not working on electric right now. Because
Apple. Okay.
Yes, Apple's on that list now. But the thing is electric. We're talking. Everyone's doing it because it's the future. There's laws coming out in some countries that say no more gas vehicles by 2030. I mean, I think that was France. There's a couple of others. So electric is happening everywhere. Honda, Ford, Kia, these big guys. Imagine if Apple had bought Kia and followed through with that back in 2019.
Yes, that's yet another thing they could have done.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
I'd forgotten that one.
But yes, electric is coming. But when we're talking about Apple and this car, this project, it's not just an electric car. Because, if Apple really wanted to build an electric car, they could. It's a known entity. It's not like they're trying to get to Mars or something. It's just 4 wheels, 4 electric motors, big battery, and a frame. And then you just add the cushy seats and steering wheel. I'm simplifying it, but
yeah, a little bit. Even I was thinking about the axle to wheel steering wheel combination.
I'm not going to list all the screws involved, but it's
well. Wait a minute. You are the guy who leaves wires hanging out after you've done things on the car.
Nothing's caught on fire in my car yet, so.
Okay.
It's just,
but okay. Apple could have done it.
Yes, this isn't a oh no, Apple they failed. They can't build a car. No, they couldn't build the car they wanted to build, and the one they wanted to build would have been so expensive and the margins so impossible to get. Like they would have had to have outpriced the market twofold to even clear the margins they wanted, and then no one would have bought it because no one could afford it. And then we're talking about bank loans. Like this is way beyond Vision Pro as far as we're being scared by the $3,500 price point. So Apple looked at it and said, "It's time. We have to call it. This isn't worth financially. It doesn't make sense. Let alone anything else. There's other reasons, but I think the primary number one reason on the list is margins, money." Shareholder value, all of that stuff that we've talked about before.
One of the things I'm quite impressed about is that they did cancel it because, I don't know if this is a US phrase as well. Have you heard of a thing called a sunk cost with things?
Sunk cost fallacy, yes.
Yeah. You would think there are companies that are having assuming they still had money to spend, having invested that much, would think, well, we've got to finish it now. And Apple's made a very cold-sounding decision. So I
that happened with
that.
NFTs. Everyone, your favorite washing machine brand, like everyone made NFTs, but by the time they were ready to publish the NFTs and do their big PR spin about buying a box of cereal with an NFT in it or something, they'd already gone and died and no one cared anymore. But they already spent the money in the NFT and the whole, advertising program, so they had to run through with it looking very foolish. But that is the sunk cost fallacy for sure. But Apple Car.
You say that. I am looking at a stack of NFTs of a certain political figure in the US across my wall, and I think they sold out, didn't it? But yes, I'd actually forgotten that NFTs existed.
I'm here to remind you of that every so often, just to.
Thanks. Okay.
So the Apple Car, though, is not a sunk cost fallacy because, see, I've seen this rhetoric going around, and I guess we'll just dive in here. So Apple abandoned the Project Titan, which has been rumored since about 2014, so about a decade worth of work and research around what would have been an autonomous vehicle. Earlier this year, we heard Apple had actually pulled back on full autonomy, which is level 4 autonomous driving, which means that you let go of the steering wheel and the car knows where it's going. Level 2 is basically what exists in like Hondas since 2016, basically lane assist that keeps the car centered in the lane. Apple had basically moved back to level 2, and where you have to keep your hands on the wheel, but the car is helping you stay away from traffic, not rear-ending anyone. There's a lot of sensors at play. I've had a car that does this. It's actually very nice to have in high traffic situations, especially stop and go traffic. But Apple pulled back to that, I think, as soon as January. That was rumored. Was it January this year or the last year? Actually, I might be missing that timeline. Someone can correct me.
I think it was more recent than that. So I remember being surprised that they'd made that type of announcement. Yeah, and then felt like they should literally just go killing it.
Yeah, a month later is if I'm right about January this year, a month later they're saying, no, we can't. We're pulling out. This is it. There's Project Titan is officially shelved, and of course, officially, unofficially, because all of this is a leaked announcement from internal to Apple. None of this has been made. This isn't on Apple's homepage. You won't find any information there. This is all leaked information, so take it with a very large grain of salt. But it seems to be from multiple sources, the initial one being very sound, and sources after that confirming it, that this has indeed happened. Mm-hmm. But so a decade of work, allegedly about $10 billion of investment, so about $1 billion a year. Not that much considering Apple's amount of money that they have. I mean, I believe in 2014 when they started, they had something like $100 billion in the bank account. So this is a drop in the bucket.
I was surprised to see how much other developers are spending. Like, I think it was a conflation. There was Ford and GM between them. Well, it was at least tens of billions that they were spending on research. So Apple was kind of weirdly outpriced in R&D. But
So getting back to sunk cost, all of this research, and Tim Cook actually commented on this. This is one of the rare moments that we got a little peek inside of Apple and how it thinks about things. But I can't give you the exact date. It's in one of my the abandoned $10 billion project Titanic disaster story that's linked in the show notes. I love that Titanic disaster. But that's what the alleged, again, New York Times reached out to some employees that may or may not be angry about getting fired. So who knows what's real?
They do sound a bit upset because nobody died yet. There were collisions, but nobody's actually died as far as I know.
Yeah. Right. How many people died in Titanic? Okay. So Tim Cook mentioned in an interview. Let's see what the date is. This is 2017. So Tim Cook was asked about Apple's car plans. They just pretty much directly asked about it. And Tim Cook actually answered. He said, "We're focusing on autonomous systems. It's a core technology that we view as very important. We sort of see it as a mother of all AI projects." And it's probably the only time Tim Cook said AI before about 2023. He said, we'll see where it takes us. We're not really saying from a product point of view what we will do. There's a major disruption looming there. You've got kind of three vectors of change happening generally in the same time frame. We'll see where it takes us. Let's see. There was one. I've lost the phrase that I wanted to say, but he said, paraphrasing now because I can't find it again. He basically said that the autonomous research that's being performed isn't just for self-driving cars. It can be applied to many different kinds of projects. He said this in 2017, not trying to give away that it was self-driving cars that they were actually working on. But he's right. And this is where we finally coming full circle. That $10 billion of research, yes, some of it was into how well you can make a brake or displaying information on a windshield. But a lot of it, and really a majority of it, probably was AI research, because in order to make a self-driving car, which was Johnny Ive's original vision in 2014 when this started, full autonomy, full self-driving, you need an operating system and an intelligent assistant and full car operating thing, AI now, we call it, machine learning back in 2014 if it was announced. This thing, which they would have called Siri, which is really funny, would have piloted the car without any user interface, and they wouldn't even have. They were so confident that they could do this, they weren't even going to include a steering wheel in this vehicle.
Yes,
and all of that work may not go to a vehicle, but it's still important for Apple as they step into releasing AI-focused features throughout 2024. And all of these employees, not all of them, of course, you can't have a brake specialist working on AI. Some people probably did have to get let go or reassigned to different divisions, but anyone working on this AI, John Gianandrea, the leader of AI at Apple, senior vice president is their title. He, taking all of that, taking his crew and jumping right into whatever's happening with iOS 18. So I wouldn't say that was a failed investment. And again, the car stuff's still good. They can use that for CarPlay. They can use that for building new systems to attach to the wider vehicle, partnering with BMW or something. And again, if Apple decides later on, okay, now's the time for an electric vehicle, they've already got all the groundwork started. So I wouldn't go out there saying Apple wasted their time with this. I think it was a smart move at the time, to try and build something, and they've pulled back at the right time, and we'll get into that because the market just isn't there.
I actually remember reading the patent where we understood there was no steering wheel, because I was poring over it thinking, there's something really key missing here. I think in the last years or so, I've easily read 100 patents to do with the car, and there was one, I remember clearly one about braking things, so I was thinking, how can you patent a brake? Doesn't everybody have brakes? And I never quite got to the bottom of that one. But everything I can think of was hardware specific, so the seats could have had lights in them to tell you where to sit down or something weird like that. And there was lots of things about direction finding and taking you to wherever you wanted to go, which felt like Apple Maps Plus kind of thing. I think I read more hardware patents than I did anything that I understood could be used anywhere else. Although actually, the moment I say that, I remember what we learnt about Apple Vision Pro, which is it 5,000 patents were granted to Apple for that headset before we realised that they were for the headset. So I think I must be missing a huge amount, and I'm trying to imagine what. What AI things could you learn from a car that you could add to an iPhone?
Well, one of the things that is very important for an autonomous vehicle is real-time operating systems. And we're already seeing the results of that research. I'm wearing it right now, Apple Vision Pro. The operating system Vision OS, of course, is not real-time, but the R1 chip inside doing real-time calculations of environmental information being piped in from multiple cameras while processing hand tracking. All of this stuff is real-time programming. And I believe a lot of this technology probably came from Project Titan, right? Like, just because they're building it for a car doesn't mean it can't be used elsewhere. And yes, there's probably specific divisions researching this for Vision Pro, but again, these applications can be applied across different things. As Tim Cook said, researching one thing can benefit the other. And while Apple does like to isolate different divisions to keep secrets, it's clear that if they reach a innovation on one thing, that it can be passed along to another thing. So, yes, real-time operating systems, for one. You need a smart assistant. So you need Siri to be able to actually do things, which we're still trying to get there. I mean, I personally don't have a problem with how Siri operates today, but I understand that it's not everyone's favorite.
I have one problem with it, and it happened again to me today, so it's on my mind. So let me rant just for 1 second. I keep asking Siri on my watch to set a timer for a certain amount of cooking or something, and I will ask for 3 minutes, and it will give me 9 hours, 27 minutes, 16 seconds. Some
very odd,
insanely different number. And you try to parse, how did I phrase this that it could possibly have misinterpreted, and I just can't get it at all. So take me to junction 5 of the M4 motorway, and it takes me instead to Sweden. I could see that being an issue.
Let me walk you back in time, because I remember us covering this. I don't have the link. Enterprising people can probably find it, but do you recall the story of Johnny Ive and who is the other guy?
Alan Dye, maybe?
Huh?
I'm thinking design people. Is Alan Dye?
Not Alan Dye. It might have been Alan Dye, but I'm thinking more car-related engineering. Anyway, he was big at Apple at the time, and he's since left to do other things. But anyway, so Johnny Ive and this other person working on Apple Car project and trying to conceive of this thing were taken to Apple's secret facility for driving, their little racetrack that they bought out in California, Sunnyvale. And they were placed in a decked out, I want to say, Fiat. And because that's one of Johnny Ive's favorite cars, so I think they just wanted to kiss up to him a little bit. And they kind of just, I don't know, the windows and stuff were closed off, and I think it was just kind of like the interior was like designed differently. I mean, they might have even removed the steering wheel for effect because it was probably remote controlled. And they had an actor sitting in with them reading a script as they drove along, pretending this was a self-driving Apple, giving them the concept tour of an Apple car as they drove around. And this actor was playing Siri, describing restaurants as they passed by. And Johnny Ive could ask queries, and they had prepared statements for different things that could occur while they were in the car. And
listen, I'm sorry, are you sure about you didn't just dream this?
No, this is real. This happened.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to find the story now because I know people are gonna want to read it. But because the reason why I know it's not made up is A, I have a distinct memory of this madness, and B, New York Times actually referenced it in their diatribe on Apple Car. I wrote the story regarding the New York Times piece, which it was fine. I feel like they our good friend Trip Mickle, I feel like he misclassified some of the actions Apple took here as like just aiming super negative for some reason. But this happens a lot in Apple reporting. I think that's the general conception when it's like, yeah, it's not great that Apple Car isn't coming out, but honestly, I agree with. Long story short, the article was about how Apple employees hated the idea of the project and called it the Titanic disaster instead of Project Titan, and they were celebrating that it was being canceled because it was just, they deemed it as an failure from the start. There was no way it was ever going to work. And I agree that some people, like, there's absolutely people in the company that have that mentality, and I agree that it was a good idea for Apple to end the project, but I feel like some of the storytelling around that was a little just a little aggressive for
yeah.
But anyway,
at that point,
he did mention the Johnny Ive drive around, and I thought that was funny. Let me see if I can find it.
I'm very curious about that. Although the fact you say it's a Fiat, that makes me think if Apple had finished it, it would have been a Fiat accompli, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was really pleased with that.
Puns are the lowest form of comedy.
Oh, how dare you agree with John Cleese, for example? Okay. I'm curious about just how this spreads out to other things of AI. I really had not thought about the real-time operating system bit, and now you've said it, I should have thought of that because we've covered Well, there are conflicting reports here, but people saying that there's data saying the pass-through effect of Apple Vision Pro is dramatically better and closer to real-time instantaneous than any other headset and things. And, that can't come from nothing. So that would make sense that there was a origin there.
Bob, our boy Bob Mansfield.
Bob!
Yes, Bob
of
Mansfield.
Course.
So let me see. There was a
going
prototype.
To a list of people who've left Apple. I thought Steve Jobs. Okay, wait. There's a prototype. Yes, tell me.
So in this article from 2019, it said a source from the information. This is talking about Johnny Ive's departure, and part of it did bring up the Bob Mansfield and Johnny Ive prototype demo of Apple Car. And for the demonstration, I've hired an actress to perform as Siri, responding to voice commands. But apparently at the time, Project Titan, the engineers involved, at least the engineers talking to Ive, were very confident. This is back in 2015, by the way, timeline-wise, where they were just like, "Oh yeah, we can build this. It's fine. Like a self-driving car, we got this." So that confidence. So this is where Trip Mickle's report comes in, as it feels a little bit hard. Again, like they just chose a stance and they followed it. But apparently, Apple Watch was launched in 2014, and Apple is desperate to find something. What was next? What was going to be Tim Cook's legacy? They have to find it. Oh no! And someone just said cars, and Tesla's doing cars. We should do it too. Oh yeah! And then everyone just kind of nodded and agreed. They rushed out the door and drove Johnny Ive around with an actress pretending to be Siri. Like it sounds so silly when you say it out loud. I don't think that's the order of events exactly. I'm sure there is a moment. Gosh, again, this is years ago. I don't know the source, but there was an interview with someone who had left Apple, and they had mentioned that Steve Jobs had talked about a vehicle, an iCar, at some point within the company. So I don't think this was just completely out of nowhere, but I do think they were looking at what Tesla was doing and the excitement around Tesla in 2014, and how they were claiming, oh yeah, 2016 full self-driving is going to happen, and here we are in 2024, and they're not even, it's not good. But anyway, so it's such a long and rich history, and I can't wait for the tell-all book to come out in 10 years.
Yeah, except it's suddenly I wonder how far they got with prototypes. Are there mock-ups? I'm going to have to watch eBay to see if there's a mysterious car suddenly auctioned somewhere. You know how it happens with prototype iMacs and iPhones and things. Maybe the Apple car will finally leak out. I think I'm wrong here.
No. So the way the prototyping systems worked is, again, the guts of a car are, don't let anyone tell this to the gearheads, but they're all engines, and they do things. They're all, and
radios.
The steering wheels and pedals and tires. That's the part that they can do. They can build a car. Again, the car isn't the mystery. It's everything else that they had to figure out. So the prototyping was basically done with a fleet of vans with sensors attached. So they had to train the sensors, train the AI, and learn streets and give it a level of confidence to drive around. So those prototyping vehicles have been photographed and actually registered with the DMV in California. So that was no secret. Apple was testing something to do with vehicles driving around in these vans with sensors strapped to them. Part of it could have been their mapping, of course, but more likely it had to do with their self-driving stuff, because we've seen their mapping cars, and they're different vehicles. So these were definitely for Apple's Project Titan driving around. So you won't be able to find one of those on eBay, I don't think.
Oh well, it was a thought. I parked next to an Apple LiDAR mapping car once, and the two people inside were having a burger each, and I was so tempted to ask them questions, but frankly, I wimped out and went and got a burger myself.
Listeners, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but again, there's a decade of history here. So please, if you are interested in Apple Car or want to try and eke out any specific details, reach out to us. We can jump on the next show and break down a couple of things a little further. But we do have to try and move on a little bit. I do have one last tidbit.
Sorry, I saw what you did there. Break down. Yeah, yeah.
No.
Car joke.
Terrible.
No, oh, come on. You're picking on my puns. I'm picking on yours. You have one more thing you want to say about Apple Car.
All right, so I do so they apparently got far enough that they were confident in letting their vans driving around campuses, shuttle buses basically, operate with these systems involved. So if you can find a shuttle bus driver at Apple Park, you might be able to learn something about Apple's Project Titan.
Well, I'll tell you what, to make this a move on, we are talking about basically an AI project that didn't work out fully. There is also an AI project from Apple that apparently is working out perfectly fine, but it's somewhat smaller scale. What do you know about Apple Ask?
Okay, so this is actually kind of a weird one. I actually reached out. So this was leaked by Mac Rumors, and I reached out to them to kind of clarify a couple things because it's just kind of like, are you sure this isn't just a fancy search tool that's just better at finding information? And they clarified some of the text for me. So basically, Apple's internal support system right now, they're kind of privately beta testing with select employees that volunteered for it to have this tool where they enter the problem. Basically, user with 10.9-inch iPad can't, use Apple Pay with iPadOS 17.1 or something. And with all these details and this random parameters, it's not just going to do a query where it returns, a search result, kind of like Google search, where it just finds previously known information and just gives you the page of the document book that it's in. No, instead it's going to parse that information and generate, right? That word's important, generate a response specific to that query. And because of that, it's possible that this is Apple testing a GPT-like system, a generative transformer system, where the support employees are basically able to get responses from what you would call the modern word AI, but it's only trained on the internal knowledge base for Apple's support system, so it's less likely to hallucinate. I won't say can't hallucinate, because these are always capable of they can make up a new support document that doesn't exist, for example. But the leaked information also suggests that there are checks and balances occurring before the answer is given, and the employees are able to vote up or down whether or not this was a useful response. So they're really trying to police this and keep a tight leash on it right now. But if it goes well, they might expand it to more places in the company, including more support people.
Actually, well, part of me thinks, is there any chance it could hallucinate and say buy Android instead or something? But every time I've spoken to, you do, yeah.
Okay, so United Airlines, I believe. So you correct me if I'm wrong. Airplane company. It's not important but airplane company has an AI chatbot for support, and someone says, I have a departed family member. I must travel immediately. Is there? I don't know why they asked this or how it came up, but basically they got the bot to say there is a bereavement program that gives them a discount on the plane tickets, which doesn't exist. The chatbot made it up, but United had to honor that coupon, and they immediately disbanded the thing. And I think there was some sort of case around it where the United basically put out, the chatbot we employed is not authorized to give actual advice or what. It was so silly, very silly. But again, this is the issue you have with systems like this being put into place, and how Apple tackles this is going to be wild.
I've had some tedious experiences with chatbots on support things. I mean, maddening stuff. But every time I've actually spoken to an Apple support person, they've been superb. Actually, they've sorted out things so well, so quickly. That's a clever thing too, because they'll know if the results are right.
Right.
Or
so
not.
I agree with your point here. A human using the tool to get me support, 100% A+. Love the idea. But if I call and I'm talking to a robot, no longer, no. Like, hang up the phone, give up level of, because I think that's a very good distinction here. These tools can be useful, but there needs to be a human element to ensure that something isn't broken along the way. Giving the employees resources like this can speed up support, can give better answers, because you can't expect average Apple employees to know everything about Apple. We're the nerds here, okay? You go to an Apple store and you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you know more about Apple than most people in that store. They're just employees. It's not like you work at McDonald's and know the history of McDonald's, right? Like, you just know how to flip the hamburger. When you're working in an Apple store, you might know a few things. It's a requirement, in fact, if you're on the floor, to be able to describe certain products a certain way. But they're not going to know about the secret hidden menu that you have to click on to do this thing. Like, that's nerd stuff. If you don't believe me, go to an Apple store. It's just the fact of life. They're just people. They're not, genies.
I want to say that everyone I've spoken to in an Apple store, once they've learned that I'm basically that I write for AppleInsider, once they've learned then, the kind of degree of nerdness has crept up. Mm-hmm. But not all of them. There is one who I thought was spectacularly ignorant in one store, and it put me off that Apple store. There are two reasonably equidistant from where I am, and so I tend to just go to the other one because of one person for it and what I had.
But I guess to bring this back around, so Apple is testing an artificial intelligence tool, GPT-like tool, but apparently I think literally a day later, it came up that, so I think AppleInsider did some digging itself, so I don't think this was from the same source, just different source, same Ask tool, but it looks like this might be more than just a support tool, and it's being tested more around the systems, but the source described it as not an LLM or generative AI, like some people think. It's actually more advanced than that, is what the person says. That it's actually more of a, let me find the exact phrase because it's interesting.
Well, I'm thinking you can't be right here, because we all know that Apple is years behind the rest of the industry.
Yeah. Machine learning has existed since the iPhone.
Exactly. They went the wrong route with machine learning. They should have been on AI from the start. But would they listen? No. This episode is brought to you by Notion. Notion combines your notes, documents, and projects into one space that's simple and beautifully designed. And it's this idea of one space that's key. Notion is so expansive and so capable that you can do everything in it, which means you have one tool, one place to go to do all you need. And it's your place, it's your space too. Your Notion looks different to mine and to everyone else's too, because as you work in it, you make a change here, you customize there, and it becomes an extension of you and your work. Also, you know this, there is no shortage of helpful AI tools out there in the world, but using those means switching back and forth between yet another set of digital tools. So instead of simplifying your workflow, in the end, it just becomes more complicated. Unless, of course, you're in Notion. And the fully integrated Notion AI, it helps you work faster, write better, think bigger, actually, doing tasks that normally take you hours in just seconds. Right there in your work. For instance, you could ask Notion to search your projects. You can set up automation so that you concentrate on the work you want to do while Notion does the organizing that you used to have to. Try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/AppleInsider. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/AppleInsider, to try the powerful, easy-to-use Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. Notion.com/AppleInsider. Thanks to Notion for its support of the Apple Insider podcast.
Do you know one thing that really stood out for me from that Trip Mickle New York Times report, just to pick on him a little more? Machine learning, a type of AI technology. They just know. Machine learning, they're not, it's not a subset, they're similes. They're the same thing. Anyway, I just thought that was just a terrible way to define it. Machine learning basically becomes, I understand what he's trying to convey, because artificial intelligence implies something bigger, but that's the problem with the term. It's not. It's just better machine learning. It's just more. Anyway, moving on. I found the phrasing in the article. So Ask is not an LLM or other generative AI like some think. Instead, this source is leaning into this, saying that because the support knowledge database and the front end to that database for support members are constantly evolving, it needs to be more intelligent than an LLM or generative AI. It's actually intended to be an advanced natural language search engine. So it's kind of a mixture of the two. It's not exactly a chat. So the problem with calling it a chatbot, like a GPT or a large language model, an LLM, is that implies that it's trained on a large data set, and that data set's increasing. But when those data sets change or evolve, it requires the thing to be updated, right? That's why you keep hearing about GPT-3, GPT-4. The data sets are getting updated. The way the query strings are being run is being updated. Like, the intelligence is getting better. But what this is suggesting is it doesn't need an update. It's just getting more intelligent on its own, because as the database evolves, it's taking in that new information on the fly, which is an important difference. And I think that's really interesting.
I can't remember, it was probably ChatGPT, or whichever version I was using, actually said to me that it only had knowledge up to 2021 or 2022.
Yes.
And at the time I thought, how unusual, ChatGPT telling me something useful and not just pretending it's got things right.
They're required to say that because you probably know this, but the reason why GPT and stuff isn't up to date with 2024 February is because they don't want it to be used for modern political manipulation. So you can't go in there and tell it to be like, make up something about this that's happening today and get horrible results and post it all over social. Like, it would just lead to a lot of issues. So they try to keep it's intelligent about things like, say you got memory loss and you forget your name and who you are and your occupation, but for some reason, like, you still know how to drive a car. Like, that core information about how the world works is still there, but the information about what's happening today is not. So I think that's interesting too.
Okay,
And
that makes sense.
Wonder how Apple would distinguish that too.
Yes. Not that anybody would use AI for improper purposes in an election year.
Oh, absolutely
like
not.
At all. Obviously not. No. I tell you, I think I've resisted long enough. For weeks and weeks now, even before you had Apple Vision Pro, I kept asking you in more details, because here I am in the UK, unable to get it. Also, it's out of my budget, and I vacillate between. I listen to you and I want one. I listen to Mike Worthley from AppleInsider and I don't. It's just back and forth. I know this. But Joanna Stern this week wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal that basically said, yeah, very nice, but she's put hers in a drawer somewhere, just like she has Meta Quest or Oculus or whichever other ones she had. You surely have now given up and just gone back to your iPads as normal.
Well, I said it earlier. I'm wearing it right now. I'm in Yosemite. It's a little cold here. Okay. I lost my microphone in the snow a couple times, but no. Yeah. So Vision Pro, yes, guys, we have another short Vision Pro segment this week.
You think it's short?
We would hope so.
I want the details.
We would hope that we can keep it brief anyway.
Yeah.
But in any case, yes. So Joanna Stern, I don't know. There's been a lot of narrative, and we've covered this last couple of weeks around Vision Pro. The nerds don't care. They're returning it in droves, and someone's eye exploded, and yada yada. And it's what is like the truth, and the truth is nobody knows. It's all mostly made up, conjecture based off of hearsay. A couple of guys at 9 to 5 Mac and a couple of prominent other publications return their Vision Pros because their eyesight isn't good enough, or they just have issues with nausea. And then that turns into everyone's returning their Vision Pro, right? There was this whole crack gate nonsense. We covered that last week, didn't we?
I think so. I mean, certainly I've heard about it before, but it seems to sort of come away. It started and then seemed to go away again. So, like, it wasn't
don't repeat Crackgate. I'm just exaggerating. Please don't make this a gate. It appears that there's a handful that have this issue. It doesn't seem to be widespread. We haven't heard. We asked for emails and responses in the article, on the podcast, on social, everywhere we could, and we talked with TechCrunch and these other publications, and I've gotten one email from a person who had this happen. So take that, again, anecdata, right? We don't know. But going back to the returning in droves and people losing interest, we don't know. Yes, Joanna Stern is a big figure in the tech sphere covering news and stuff, but Joanna Stern's also a different kind of nerd, very old school classic Mac nerd, right? Respect everything that she does as a journalist. She's great.
I have a huge amount of time for her. I think she's excellent.
She makes awesome reviews for the iPhone, and I sympathize with her for putting it in a drawer, because this thing is a very personal, very specific device. It's not for everyone, and it's just not for her. That I don't think we should read into it as, oh no, this thing sucks. It's just, oh no, this thing isn't for Joanna Stern. That's all you can learn from her putting it away. But I do find it funny that became a story on its own. But we have learned from more rumor-ish leak data, analytic type stuff that isn't from Apple, so again, grain of salt, but it looks like the return rate for Apple Vision Pro is on par with iPhone 15 Pro, which is about 1% of those sold have been returned, which is a far lower number than I guess what people were guessing. I didn't have a number in my head, but I don't know, 1%, sure, why not? And if you do the math, I guess 1% of 100,000 is am I right? Is that 1,000? Yeah. So if that's, 1,000, 2,000 returns. So if you see 2,000 returns across the United States, maybe that looks big, but out of the amount sold, it's a actually relatively small number and comparable to other Apple releases. Seems to be fine. And again, this whole crack thing, we just still haven't really been hearing from, we have contacts we've been talking to and stuff, and just haven't really heard anything about big support. There hasn't been a big wave of people, and people have these headsets. I'm wearing one, and yes, TechCrunch's, I believe it was TechCrunch, their review unit did have the crack issue, but it's the only major publication that we've heard of that with this issue. So again, this seems to be isolated. The returns are also limited. So I just find it funny when it comes to Apple products, the littlest bit of news can blow up very quickly, and it turns into everyone's returning Vision Pro. And once we get the actual data, those same publications just kind of stay silent on the subject and don't correct or retract or anything.
Oh, there's a story this week circulating that demand for the iPhone 15 is so low in China that third-party resellers are dropping the prices. But they're dropping it slightly less than Apple has dropped it in China, and they do this in China about this time every year. I was shocked to realise we're kind of mid-cycle now, almost 6 months in.
When's Chinese New Year?
Good point. Not very long ago, I think.
Also,
there's the 618 festival coming up.
Yeah,
too.
So there's a lot of Chinese holidays in the spring that Americans, I think, just forget happen. Yeah. So there's a lot of discounts around that. Apple doesn't generally discount things, but the resellers do. Just like sales at Best Buy, you can go get BOGO deals on iPhones in America all the time. Apple doesn't. They authorize those.
Sorry, hang on. I've got to check. BOGO.
Buy one, get one.
Right, in England, that used to be known as bog off, buy one, get one free kind of thing. And I kind of liked that. I don't know, does that travel very well?
I like yours better.
More... Yeah, I
Sounds
think
like
yours
you're
is
saying
safer,
bug off. Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
I like it.
Okay, all right. So there are lots of offers and things, but they're being interpreted as disastrous.
It's just this tea leaf reading gets exhausting because people want to take the smallest amount of data and blow it up into the largest scope that they can, and it's just that's just not how data works. I mean, take a prob and stat class, guys. I mean, a 1 day class is all the information you'll ever need to know about statistics, and it's that the first sentence out of the teacher's mouth should be, "This is all made up," because it's true. I'm not joking. My prob and stat teacher in high school, the first thing out of their mouth was, "This is pretty much all made up, but we have reason to believe these patterns lead to statistically isolating results that can be true, but not necessarily true." So yeah, again, it's fun. Anyway, so back to Vision Pro and sales and all of that. Do you know how much it costs to, if you take all of the pieces of the Vision Pro apart and, you know, you go to Radio Shack and needed to buy all the parts, how much it would cost to get all the pieces of the Vision Pro? The bill of manufacture.
Materials.
Bill of materials, yes.
I'm trying to judge from your voice here. I'm thinking it's probably not low. Is it?
It's significant enough.
Okay, but there's got to be a profit margin.
Mm-hmm.
So base price is $3,500. I'm going to go high. I'll say $3,000.
$1,542.
Okay. Because I have a problem with BOM stories because that's the price of the second headset. The first one cost all of those years of work and effort and things. But
right.
Okay.
So the bill of materials doesn't really tell us anything that we didn't know. It's very expensive OLED displays. I think those are the most expensive individual component in the entire headset. But just to remind everyone, I'm sure people listening already know this, but the bill of materials does not account for research, development, employees being paid, the janitor cleaning the hallways at Apple Park outside of where they're building the Vision Pro. Right, there's so much that goes into everything. The cafeteria running 24 hours a day while these guys live in Apple Park trying to build. It's so weird, but it's true. Like anytime anyone hears about a budget, think of the military. Think of what it takes to run a military base 24 hours a day. Now apply that to Apple Park. These people have to work, they have to eat, they have to sleep, you have to pay them. They also have to have parts to research with. They have to have things that they can set on fire, explode, blow up, give up on because they need to do materials testing. They need to do every sort of thing with every piece of equipment over 5-6 years as they develop this product. And we know that this has taken at least 5 years to develop.
You say this, but really they just copied Oculus and
right.
Quest something. So that and maybe a sandwich at lunchtime. What more could they possibly want?
With a $1,500 bill of material, I just erased something. With a $1,500 bill of materials, honestly, not bad considering the price is $3,500. Apple could have definitely gone higher. This is about 40%, 44% of the price of the headset itself. So it's taking in those margins, and it's accounting for the price of everything else involved in building it. But I just find that all very interesting. People love to bicker about this as like, oh, it's overpriced. It's like, actually, for $1,500, Apple could have probably charged $5,000 for this thing and got away with it.
The thing that interests me is you just casually threw in that you're in Yosemite and that very evocative thing of it's cold. You've dropped your microphone a couple of times. Is Yosemite the place you go to when you want to work now in the headset?
I change. I maybe not a daily rotation, but I move around every couple of days just to have a different view. I think I'm going to butcher this because I still don't know how to. I haven't heard a person actually pronounce it. Haleakala, I think. It's a Hawaiian mountain range. It's beautiful.
Oh, right.
It's one of the things you're looking over a cliffside at a sunset with swirling fog and clouds. It's very beautiful. That's my favorite, just because it has it feels like there's a lot of depth there, and the windows can kind of just go anywhere. Anyway, it's really cool. That and Mount Hood are my go-tos, but every now and then I'll go to Yosemite. The white sands are fine. Like, just some of these feel a little empty. I think it'd be cool if Apple had some animations playing in the background, like if a deer just poked its head out of the trees every now and then. But
there's no sound, is there?
Yes,
for any of these.
You can.
There is.
You can actually control that volume. You can set the environment volume to be louder or quieter, but yeah, depending on where you are and what time of day you've selected, there's different sounds.
Goodness.
Mount Hood will have birds chirping. It'll start raining and you'll hear the water rippling across the lake. In Yosemite, it's windy, but there's you can hear animal like birds and stuff in the background. But yeah, mostly just bird noises and stuff. Crickets at nighttime, stuff like that.
Nighttime. I'm thinkingly assumed it was the same visual all the time. Are there seasons in these things?
No, but that's something interesting that could come later. I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg for immersive environments, and that brings up a good point. Mike, asked us all about what our favorite environments would be for cinema. We're going to do a separate one, I think, on like natural environments. So this one's focused on theaters, and specifically because Apple Vision Pro only has technically one theater view, but two if you want to be super technical, because when you're viewing media in Apple TV, you can watch it from a movie theater with different seating. So you can be in the front row, in the base, or the front row, the balcony,
level of detail.
Left side, right side. You can choose different things like that in the theater. That's cool. You don't see the theater seats, but you see that you're kind of in a theater-shaped room. That's all very fun. I'm a balcony front row guy, which is a seat that doesn't exist, but you're kind of hovering midair, suspended in front of a very large screen, whatever size a movie theater screen would be. But that's good. I think my favorite way to watch 3D movies. But for the shock and awe effect, there is another environment just for viewing media inside of Apple TV, and it's hard to find. And no one explained this, and so anyone listening with Vision Pro, if you haven't tried this yet, go do it because it's amazing. Be in Mount Hood at night, and then start media, and go to the theater selector. But instead of selecting the theater, select Mount Hood at night again inside of that, and it will zoom your screen out over the lake and have a reflection of the screen over the water, and a 150-foot, Apple did give us that number, a 150-foot display, at least it appears so, at night in the mountains. It's really, really stunning effect, and the 3D movies work in that environment as well. It's really fun. But those are the only two available today.
Yeah, so you're saying about Mike, he's asking everybody what do they want.
And Disney does have its environments, and other apps will have some too, but right now Apple's environments, there's only two for viewing media. So the question to you, William, is where would you like to watch movies inside of Vision Pro in a fully immersive environment?
Goodness. The thing is, I don't care about the environment. Well, no, that's not true. When I go to cinema, I do my level best to get a seat dead centre of it for the optimum effect. So I obviously care about that and the positioning of it. If the film's any good, I'm concentrating on the film. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't mind pretending to be in, I don't know, the Symphony Hall is a place near me. City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra's home. Symphony Hall here is a gorgeous building with it. I don't think they've ever shown films there, but they could. An impressive piece of architecture would be nice. What's Radio City Music Hall like? I've never been inside. I'd like to see inside places. Yeah. Right. What about you?
I could imagine it would be fun to watch a movie in the Sistine Chapel or something.
Wouldn't that feel just slightly wrong?
Wrong,
a
right.
little bit.
No, but actually my pick was drive-in. I don't think it was included, but I think it'd be fun to be at not just any drive-in, but a 50s drive-in with the old vehicles around you. And you could even have a mode where you turn it on so it sounds like it's coming from that silly speaker next to your car.
You do that thing of yawning and stretching and
you
just
can either
putting your arm around your partner and
You're either on a picnic blanket in the car or on top of the car. You have to choose. You're either on top of the car or on the front hood. You have to choose which one you're on. No, I think there's a lot of potential here, but I'll take it even further. I personally like the environments, but I'm with you. They feel a little distracting unless I want them there. I'm probably going to just watch in the movie theater because there's nothing there to distract me. I'm just focused on the content. But if you were going to do something cool, make them into kind of an interactive video game. Make them aware of what movie you're watching and have things happen based on the movie that you're watching. Like if you're in the Disney environments and you're on Avengers Tower and you get to that scene where they're fighting in New York, have the aliens flying around New York on Avengers Tower. Or if you're watching Endgame, have one of the alien spaceships breaking through the atmosphere in the corner. Like have things change. Or Monsters, Inc., like that floor. There's Easter eggs in these, and it's great. You can look around at Monsters, Inc., and you can see the guitar from Coco, and you can see photos of different things. Like, it's cool that they put these Easter eggs, but it's not interactive, and nothing moves, nothing happens. But I think it would be even more interesting, even if it was on a bit of a loop, and maybe it would get annoying. I don't know. But if there were interactions or or pre-playing video, or if you were to look over your shoulder to have a monster poking its head around at you at the cubicle and then it ducks behind it or something, right? Like have a little bit more entertainment value and variety to it, and I think that would be fun as an addition to the movie you're watching. Again, I wouldn't want to watch a new episode of Mandalorian this way because I want to focus on the content. But if I'm revisiting Finding Nemo for the 100th time, wouldn't it be fun to have like a shark swim by while you're in the coral reef watching a movie or something? I don't know.
I've been reading a lot of interviews with film editors recently talking about they will take out 16 frames from a film and radically improve the scene because the timing and the rhythm is perfect. None of them allow for taking out 16 frames, but oh look, the audience is going to be looking over there off the side of the screen for it. No.
Yeah,
none of this.
None
at all.
I'm with you. I am definitely a purist when it comes to cinema. That's why, like, the first time I'm watching something, I want silence. I want to focus on the TV. I don't want anyone talking about it because I will. If a conversation goes on long enough, I will pause it. I am that guy and just be like, "Look, guys, we're watching this. Please let me watch it. You can rewatch it later." But yes, it's one of those things. But if it's something I'm rewatching, I'm a little bit more loosey goosey, and I like the idea of there being an entertaining element to it.
I do like directors and writers' audio commentaries and things after I've seen it the first time.
Imagine if you are Disney. Again, I'll keep going back to Disney, or even Apple. So these are companies in control of larger media things with software. So I think they're both in that sphere where this is capable. I don't see HBO doing this, for example. But imagine if you're one of these companies and you're developing For All Mankind, or you're developing the next Pixar movie. Imagine building an immersive environment around a project you're currently making so that it is part of what you're watching. And then suddenly the screen in front of you, things are happening around you as if you were that aren't part of the media, but it's as if you're there. Like, imagine if you're watching Ted Lasso and you're suddenly watching the game, but you're in a seat watching the game, right? Just ways that you could really make this crazy is like, imagine, again, Ted Lasso, they jump to the soccer field. I know that show has 5 minutes of soccer across the entire 3 seasons. You wouldn't know this, William.
No,
they don't really focus on the football. But
Thank you.
Imagine if you're sitting in a stadium, like they go to a game, and now you're sitting in the Greyhound Stadium, and the show is playing on the giant replay board or whatever, but you look down and you can see the field around you, that kind of stuff. Like, just, I'm not imaginative enough to think of it, but imagine programming a show around immersive environments and using them and moving you between them and stuff like that, kind of giving you this. In video games, it's called 2.5D, when you take a old 2D game and add 3D elements to it. It's the same kind of concept where you're keeping the 2D, the show, the movie the same, but you're bringing more of the external 3D environment in with it and just adding to the immersion, and I think fun. I think there would be 2 ways to watch it again, without or with, and I think that having the environments and stuff involved could be fun or interesting, but probably a little gimmicky. I can see that too.
I saw Wonder Woman in a cinema here in the UK, the first, I've forgotten who wrote it, but Gil Gadot version of it, and it's shown in what they called 4D, which meant the chair moved.
And they blow air on you and splash maybe some water every now and then.
Exactly that. There's one moment when one character is walking through the rain for probably 16 frames, and a little dot of water appeared on my head, and all I thought was, yeah, right, okay.
It's a little
much.
Story.
Yeah. I think for immersive drama and things like that, write better films. There you go. All right, and on that bombshell, I have one more thing I've got to ask you. As an Apple Vision Pro headset user, are you pleased or displeased with the rumor that iOS 18 is in some way going to make iPhones more like Vision Pro? And I don't fully understand how.
Well, that one's totally made up and not true, so we don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a shorter conversation than I thought.
Yeah, I believe that comes from Majin Buu, which probably just got it from a random concept artist off of Weibo. And yeah, that leaker is fine as far as, and there's a reason why we cover him. Just to break into it.
Sure.
We cover him because we have the rumor score. If we didn't have the rumor score, we'd probably ignore him. But because we can kind of give readers a gauge of what's true and what isn't, it lets us cover more rumors. And this person does find sources, and again, sometimes maybe from their own internal sources. I don't know. But usually just from Weibo, wandering around, right. I guess, finding things. It's a Chinese social media website.
Internal sources sounds like a euphemism for they made it up. It was also in their own head. Also
possible. This seems more like a character than an actual leaker. A lot of these leakers do turn into characters. If you've been following this long enough, we used to have Loves to Dream, and it would propose every leak as if they had just woken up from a dream. Like there's always a personality to it, but Majin Buu is just kind of and the problem is they always reply to whatever post they make and say, don't take this too seriously, and just to kind of cover their own anyway. This one feels made up. This one doesn't feel real. But Mark Gurman did come out with a report saying there is a redesign coming in iOS 18, which is exciting. I think we'll see a little bit more Vision Pro-like elements. We're already seeing it in the podcast app in iOS 17.4. There's a new Now Playing bar that appears to kind of float above the UI a little bit, just very Vision Pro-like with the pill shape and everything. So I could see one borrowing from the other, as has always been the case in Apple developing UI. iPad gets something, then Mac gets something, then iPhone. So now that Vision OS is out there, and again, Apple isolates everyone, iOS didn't see what Vision OS looked like before it was ready, right? So they're only just learning themselves, and they're like, wow, that's cool, we're going to do that too. And these operating systems coming in June are the first time we actually get to see that implemented. So I'm with Mark Gurman. I think we're going to see some changes. I don't know if we can classify it as a redesign, but I guess we'll have to see what it looks like. But I think there's going to be elements that look like Vision OS, but it's not going to be a grid of circle icons on the home screen or anything like that. It's not going to look like Vision OS, but they could definitely borrow from each other. And I think that kind of uniformity is useful.
We're just into March and already I'm wishing for June. Let's stop that there. So, it occurs to me, by the way, that the next time you and I speak, iOS 17.4 will be out, and the world will change in the European Union, which is next door to me, but quite far away from you. Be interesting to see what happens.
Yes, so everyone's waiting for regulation to step in and say this is bad, but of course we don't know what they're going to say because they actually can't say anything until after March 7th, where they're able to give judgments about the provisions that Apple and everyone have provided. So we'll see what happens there. I'm interested. We're also seeing movement on the United States front, which we're mentioning it now, but we're years from a resolution. But now that the DOJ in the United States is ready to move in on this antitrust case with Apple, it means that after a long and winding road of litigation, probably in 2027, they might arrive at the same conclusion and ask Apple to give America, United States users the same provisions that they gave the EU, and bring some of those App Store changes, alternative marketplaces and stuff to quiet the antitrust complaints. Again, probably will take a long time, especially during an election year when we have no idea what the opinions of the possible incoming new presidency might be, whether it's the same president or a new one. There's too many questions in the air, could affect too many decisions. All I can say is nothing's happening this year, so it'll be a while.
I think really what you're saying is stay tuned. I think that's a good point to end on. Wes Hilliard, thank you very much for this. You're actually back sooner than me. We're here most weeks, sometimes you and the guest, sometimes me and the guest, but usually it's you and me. We're back in a week, but people will be able to hear and see you much sooner on Mondays with the new HomeKit Insider podcast. You and Andrew, do you know what's coming up this week, or is it all an exciting mystery for us?
It's mostly a mystery. HomeKit Insider, funny enough, there's not a lot of news that happens there, so it's more difficult to get topics. So we tend to focus on a couple of new products that have been announced, stuff like that. I'm not entirely aware of what we're going to be discussing this week, but it should be entertaining as usual. And one last meta note. if you ever pay attention to the show notes, I'm pretty sure William does this, but go look at the show notes. I put these together most weeks, and I usually include everything we want to talk about, but we don't necessarily get to everything, especially this week. There's usually a grab bag of topics at the end under just a miscellaneous headline. Go look at the show notes. There's a lot of good stuff in there this week we didn't get to. There's just too many big topics this week to get to the smaller stuff. And pay attention to that every week, because there's usually a lot of things that you might have missed if you're not on Apple Insider every single day. So,
right. Good point. In that case, let's Wes and I go right next week's news. Yeah, we may have to wait for Apple to do things, I grant you, while you check out the links for this week's news. And in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Thank you as well to our sponsor, Notion, for supporting the Apple Insider podcast. See you next time.